bill, and I have accommodated 8 of them because they were reasonable. To say that a government entity, i.e. the state of Illinois, should not require a state identification from somebody that is, number one, dealing with children. You know, I think that in itself is problematic. Number two, individuals who are receiving benefits from the state, meaning that our taxpayer dollars are going for benefits for unverified individuals, is problematic. We need to verify who is receiving these benefits. Now, I do want to state that when this organization, prior to this organization being created, and it was under DHS, they were required to provide identification in 3 forms. That first form was a state ID. That was, you know, you had to have something with your picture on it. That was the first thing. The second thing is verification through Experian. And then the third one was an in-person verification, which required a form to be filled out. Now, they did not ask me to amend the bill to add any of the previous identification processes. What they did say is just take us out totally, because we do not want to have to ask for a state ID to verify identification, which I feel is very problematic. Thank you.
Thank you. Any response?
Yes. I do recognize that this is a third amendment that doesn't deal with this issue. We had reached out to the sponsor a few weeks ago with our concerns, and I think there was a miscommunication because I was under the understanding that maybe that she was and agreed to our language. That's why I took it to LRB and got it drafted and handed it to her. So there was a miscommunication on our end, and that's why I think it was important for us to get our testimony on the record. And then you can speak to the others, Jennifer.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Jennifer Cohen-Deal. I am the General Counsel for the Illinois Department of Early Childhood. So I just want to clarify the 2 programs that we are speaking about that our objection is over are the Early Intervention Services Program and the Child Care Assistance Program. Those are currently administered by DHS. So the process, we are not changing the enrollment process. This information, the enrollment process will be the same as it is at DHS for these 2 programs. I understand that DHS runs other programs, but for Early Intervention Services and Child Care Assistance Program, there is not an ID requirement. Currently, the Early Intervention Services Program, the requirements for enrollment are set by the Individuals with Disability or Education Act, Part C, and it requires an evaluation of the child. The money for that program goes to the service provider, who is a medical professional providing early intervention services. For Child Care Assistance Program, the verification comes in 3 different forms or supporting documentation. The parents or guardians must show that they are attending school, which they will receive a school schedule and enrollment letter. If there are discrepancies, the CCAP team here in Illinois will call the school and verify the information. 2 is an employment check with either pay stubs or an employment letter. And number 3 is a protective services referral letter from DCFS. So those are the requirements to enroll. Similar to early intervention services, Child Care Assistance Program, the funding, the payments for that go to small businesses in the community that provide child care services. So they are not going to the individuals who are applying, they are going to small businesses or medical providers. And again, these are benefits for children who would not have a form of ID. It is their parents, and we do not believe that the children should suffer the consequences if their parents cannot obtain an ID when they are complying with the requirements that have been in place at DHS and that will remain in place at IDEC. Thank you.
DHS requires an ID as one of their things, so they have 3. So it's an ID. If you don't have an ID, then there's Experian, That's 2. If you don't have that, then there's the personal interview. Now, you didn't ask that I incorporate anything that DHS currently has in process. What you said is totally remove you, totally exempt you from the bill, which I will not do. Now, we could have come to a good agreement, but you were not willing to work with me on anything other than totally exempting you. So just putting that out there.
That's not true. We are more than willing to work with you still
You
to this day.
only offered me
Representative,
language to exempt you.
because I
not
thought that
to
that's what we
work with
agreed
your
to,
current
and so I got
process.
it drafted.
You didn't ask me to work with your current process. I'm just saying. So,
Happy to do that.
Any other questions from members? Spokesperson Weber?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Mayfield, thank you very much for all your hard work on this bill. I did have a couple questions. I know we had reached out to Illinois Credit Union and Illinois Municipal League to see if they still had any opposition. Have you heard anything from them?
they were supposed to.
They
have receptions tonight, but they are going to slip in as proponents. Ben Jackson actually gave me the language to file. I do have a message on my phone from the community bankers, Jerry Peck, if you'd like to read it, just thanking me for the amendment. So they are going to slip in as proponents. Everybody had receptions tonight, all the financial organizations.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? There being no further debate, Leader Evans moves to recommend that House Floor Amendment Number 3 to House Bill 4538 be adopted. Is there leave?
Leave, Madam Chair.
With 9 votes in favor, 0 opposed, and 0 with no position, House Floor Amendment Number 3 to House Bill 4538 is recommended for adoption and will be favorably reported to the House floor.
Never mind.
The chair recognizes Representative Katzmo to present House Bill 5236.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for everyone's patience. I'm back here.
Amendment number 1.
Yes, I'm here on floor amendment number 1 to House Bill 5236. It is a floor amendment, so we will be handling that on the floor. The amendment is largely to reconcile what was in our pre-draft with what was in the draft that was provided back to us by LRB that was filed during the original filing deadline, to create more alignment with some of the procedures that exist in Connecticut and other states who are concurrently with us filing this legislation. I am open to any questions from the committee.
Thank you. Our witness slips have 22 proponents, 5 opponents, and 0 with no position. The proponents include Elizabeth Robb Sender and John Fisher with the Normal Public Library, Hannah Barotz with the Illinois Heartland Library System, Kate Hall with the Northbrook Public Library, Ryan Livergood with the Warren Newport Public Library District, and Sarah Murray with the Algonquin Area Public Library District. The opponents include Craig Willard and Jeffrey Glass with the Motion Picture Association, Paul Ramey with the Association of American Publishers, Taylor Anderson with TechNet, James Sherwood with the Entertainment Software Association. Is there anyone testifying, Representative?
I do have a witness with me available virtually to give some brief comments if it's helpful to the committee. He was also available for questions. Also wanted to note for the record, thank you to the 34 bipartisan sponsors for this bill, including leaders from both sides of the chamber.
Okay, well then, are there any questions for the sponsor? The chair recognizes Representative Weaver.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you help me understand this conflict or not a conflict with the Federal Copyright Act?
So it's not a conflict with Federal Copyright Act, and I can certainly give you my lay interpretation of
Yeah.
that, but my professor, who's online,
Oh.
might actually be a perfect person to do that, because
would
he
love
is
to
the
hear
one
it.
leading the national litigation strategy
Okay.
and is connected with some of the best law schools in the country. So if Professor Courtney's available, would love to have him pop in and field that question
Yeah,
since
that'd
he
be
made
great.
the time.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm going to learn something today, so I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, no, I've really enjoyed working on this bill, and I get why the original iterations that made compulsory license terms were a copyright issue, but that's not what this bill does. This
Okay.
bill is about what contracts we are and aren't going to allow our libraries to make.
Okay.
So it's a little different paradigm. Staff, how do we get Professor Courtney?
I can see you.
You got
Hello,
it all
everyone.
dressed up just for us. Look at the bow tie.
Oh, sorry.
You're
I
just
came home
miss-
from work.
You're
Yeah.
just missing the tweed, and you'd be the full.
I had tweet on earlier. It was a very good guess, sir. Thank you. I'd love to talk about that briefly, if I may.
Please.
Okay, so yeah, my name is Kyle Courtney. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. Could you state? I would just ask if you would identify with your
Absolutely.
name
I
and
feel-
where you're from, sir.
Absolutely. I filled out a witness slip as well, so I am in the system. My name is Kyle K. Courtney. I'm a copyright lawyer and librarian. I founded the eBook Study Group, which is a nonprofit committed to protecting libraries' ability to serve the public, and we work with states across the United States on this particular issue. My day job is an executive director of a law library here in Boston, and I've taught copyright and cyber law and all sorts of great things over the years. So I think that's why I'm here. So I'd be happy to talk about the copyright implications of the bill, which are none. Just to be clear, we referenced an earlier attempt called the Maryland eBooks Law, and that was an attempt in which I advised Maryland not to go forward with it because it had something in it that was some particular language that said shall offer, so that it said if a publisher works in the state of Maryland, it shall offer this same thing to libraries, and it forced publishers to sell to libraries. That interfered with the copyright owner's right to refuse to license, and this was struck down by a court as preemption. I just want to be clear, the Illinois bill represents an entire pivot from that Maryland bill that happened a few years ago now, and it contains no such mandate. It only regulates the contract after the publisher voluntarily decides to enter the Illinois market. So this is a consumer protection and procurement bill, not a copyright bill. States have police power to regulate contracts and business practices. And we do this with everything, right? From software to farm equipment, right? Just because a contract involves a copyrighted ebook doesn't give the publisher a get out of state law free card. So this is not a copyright bill. It is a state bill focusing on state law.
So I'm thinking about this in the context of like other digital assets. Like, for example, I use Spotify. And so using Spotify, I have the right to use Spotify's music under the contract that I'm in with Spotify as a user. So even though there's copyrights over the assets that I'm using with Spotify, my ability to leverage that asset is not necessarily based on it as a copyright. It's based on the contract that I'm entering into with them as a user, and this regulates that contract. It doesn't regulate the copyright. Is that what I'm understanding?
Absolutely, sir. And that is because of a special situation that exists for libraries, in that the only way libraries can acquire ebooks, we can't say buy anymore, is by licensing. It's forced rental agreements. So that's why libraries are looking to these contracts and saying these contracts need to be more reflective of the library mission, which serves a public and state-facing interest.
Okay. Okay, that's helpful. Then if that's the case, I understand that I think Connecticut is the other state that's moved. And if I understand it correctly, Connecticut's law says that that will go into effect once another state moves, which just seems like a peculiar structure to me. And I wonder why Connecticut didn't just go for it like we
I'll tell you, I could tell you why in depth. I drafted that bill and is now law, but you're right, there's a trigger act that sits there. The Trigger Act was based on the fact that Connecticut, New York, and some other places are powerhouses of the publishers. And there was concern that most of the CEOs live in Greenwich, Connecticut, and that they had folks there that were not interested maybe in sticking their neck out to be first in the nation. And so there were a number of states, including New Jersey, Illinois, as we're here today, Minnesota, I'm missing one, Rhode Island, and District of Columbia that introduced similar bills. I call these sibling bills to the Illinois bill. And they felt they were smaller states. Rhode Island, especially Connecticut sort of thing, and they were like, it would help us to be able to all float at once by combining ourselves with larger states, and so that we all step out together. It's a tactical strategy. It prevents risk-averse, legislative action, and most importantly, I think, it sets a tone for something that I think is overdue, which is understanding how much a library contributes to the common good for literacy, education, access, and all those great things.
Got it. So I thought that Illinois was only going to be triggering Connecticut, but it's Connecticut and Rhode Island. Are there others?
So Connecticut is the only one that has passed. Right now, the others that are in session, including yours,
Got it.
are Rhode Island, Washington, D.C., Minnesota, Illinois. There's also a bill in Hawaii, but we haven't checked in on that in a while either. And so those are the ones that are currently tied with some sort of triggering event. Some have 2, some have 3. But they are all in bill form right now. They have not passed. The only one that has been signed into law pending the triggering bill is Connecticut.
Okay. I'm good. You guys have any questions?
Any other questions?
Sorry, one last follow-up. Can you expand on the forced rental agreement?
Sure, absolutely. So the way in which, and I guess it's problematic ways, but there is no open market currently for the libraries, right? There's no negotiations. These are contracts of adhesion that are being chosen by the publishers to be thrust upon the libraries. This didn't exist until the advent of ebooks and proprietary technology. But let's say around the mid-2000s, publishers chose to start metering access to libraries and stop selling them ebooks. And sell meaning giving them actually ownership rights. They no longer do that. These are now rental agreements in which libraries rent the access to the ebooks for a period of time. That period of time could be 26 checkouts or 1 to 2 years. And then after the triggering either timing or checkout events, they have to re-rent those books. So for popular titles, they will be re-renting and paying the full price set by the publisher over and over again because they have triggered 26 checkouts or they have been around for the year. Now, this is kind of an anathema to the library mission, which typically, when you buy a book in the analog world, you owned it, right? And so this is the profound library issue, right? So Illinois bought a library book, they owned it. They could lend it, they could preserve it, they could share it across state lines, the interlibrary loan, but that has been replaced by this licensing trap. And on top of that, there's also pricing disparity as well. You and I can buy something off Kindle or any other e-reader for $9.99. Libraries are charged between 3 and 10 times the amount what the consumer pays for the same ebook. And they could do that because these licenses are the only place to get this. They are metered this way. And so when the book disappears from the collection, something else, it's unusual for the library mission to have books disappear. But if 2 years go by and you don't renew and re-rent those books, they will leave forever unless you pay that same price over and over again. So again, it's not just a library problem. Mm-hmm. It's a record-breaking drain on public funds.
So, is there like so you mentioned these, like metering, and maybe if I can kind of wander on my question a little bit, I maybe can explain it better. So, I would hope that the free market would address this in a way to say, like, Penguin's being unreasonable, well, guess what? HarperCollins is being more fair. We'll go to them, and the free market will say, okay, we're not being fair actors, and you have many options in buying books, and so maybe that means you won't buy books from us. But is what I'm understanding that they're, for lack of an accusation, colluding in a single metering database where that competition's not able to drive down the price?
Yeah, there's a couple things going on there. So there's only one book comes from one source. So I'm not going to talk about collusion or Sherman Act implications of that, but this is different than your average procurement. Like Illinois wants to build a road, they put out a bid from a road. You get multiple bids, right? After that comes, you pick the one and you have the road forever. The thing is with books, you can't put it out to bid. These are state funds being spent on something that is metered access. And again, just to be clear, libraries didn't pick these terms, right? We didn't want 26 checkouts. We didn't think that modeled what a normal book life would be. But the free market assumes that all costs and benefits of a transaction are captured by the buyer and the seller, and it's rarely the issue. But here, there is no symmetry in this at all that we can compare it with, other than if you go to my bidding analogy, imagine that road that you put out to bid disappears after 2 years, or you have to rebuy it every time 26 cars drive over it, right? So the analogy there is it's a rough one, but that's the situation that libraries are in, and why the free market doesn't really work in that scenario.
Okay, that's all. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Spokesperson Weber?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I have to say, when someone uses the term forced rental agreement when they're talking about private business, that concerns me. Secondly, I was told that authors are good with this, but yet I see that the Authors Guild are opposed. I don't know I can't remember, Madam Chair, did we read off the opponents? I've got Protect the Creative Economy Coalition, the Authors Guild, Copyright Alliance, Motion Picture Association, LexisNexis, Penguin. I mean, there's quite a big list here of opponents to the bill. I understand that when you buy a copy of a book, you can calculate based on rental times and everything else how many times that book will be read in a year. The concern I have here is with digital copies is you can buy one copy and rent it 20,000 times. I'm not an author, but I can only imagine how an author would feel if that happened to them. So what kind of mechanism is there a limit to how many rentals a digital book could get under forced agreement?
Is that for me, sir?
It's for anyone that wants to answer.
Professor, it's fine if you want to take it, or I can also chime in.
Oh, no, I'm just trying to follow parliamentary procedure here. Well, let's talk about that. So the libraries don't pay the authors, right? So libraries do not pay the authors. Those are private contracts that exist between the authors and the publishers, right? We don't know what those are. But I think we need to stop using authors as shield for corporate pricing strategies here, right? If a publisher charges a library $90 for a $15 ebook, I don't know how much the author gets from that. I don't know the royalty rates. Honestly, libraries are the best free marketing that the publishers have for books. We do book talks, we host the authors, we share the books, we make them available. And the Authors Guild is just one organization that represents authors. They certainly don't represent all authors. There's also another nonprofit called Authors Alliance, which has joined us in other states. I don't know if they've joined us here today, talking about how libraries are the best engine of not only discoverability of authors, but also the ability to buy more and different and diverse authors. But the ebooks bills don't really, the ebook laws as they currently exist don't allow that, because you have to re-rent the same book over and over, and that's the same author. So again, libraries don't compete with bookstores. We build audiences for them. We make digital titles affordable. That way, Illinois readers can discover more authors, not fewer. So, and by the way, when I say forced, it's because the library mission includes things like interlibrary loan, preservation, access, loans. All of those mission-based realities of a library, just checking out a book at the front desk, lending a book to another place, making it, those were chosen by the publishers.
I appreciate your comments and stuff, but really not what my question was. So my concern is that, again, you have a book that gets rented out. You can calculate how many times a year that book is rented out. If an author's digital copy is purchased by a library, can that be rented out unlimited times? And the reason I bring this up is because when the library started carrying VHS and DVDs, it literally put every local mom and pop store out of business. Because why go out and pay $4 or $3, whatever, at Blockbuster when you can get it from $2 from the library? New releases included. So I guess my concern is, if an author is paid by copy read, you can calculate that on a paper copy. On a digital copy, in one of these contracts, hypothetically, how many times could a digital copy be viewed under one of these forced contracts?
So a couple of comments that I think are worth adding here. Last time, you may recall, I had a sequence of witnesses who were available, but to spare everybody time and energy, we did not have all of them testify. One of them was a librarian who themselves was an author, who was prepared to testify in committee. Part of the reason for that testimony was because as an author, whether she was getting a book purchased by a single buyer on Amazon or for 4 to 10 times the price, as the professor noted, from a library, she was getting the same tiny cut as an author. There isn't a proportional share that's going to the authors, and that's why you're seeing dissent among the different author organizations. These terms aren't really any fairer to the authors than they are to the taxpayers or the libraries. What we're really talking about here is using our collective power as a highly educated state where we love our books to insist that we have commercially reasonable terms offered to us. Throughout the entirety of this negotiation process, we have not received a single red line or a single counteroffer. They are unwilling to even engage in a conversation. And that's why it's incredibly important that the coalition of states that the professor outlined band together to say either these terms need to get fairer, or it is our choice as taxpayers to say no thank you to coercive contract terms. Nobody's going to be forced to bring any particular set of terms to the table, but we need to negotiate fairly and freely in ways that reflect the interests of taxpayers, libraries, readers, and authors, not just the publishers.
Thank you, Representative. And I do agree. We need fair contracts, and I don't agree with what they're doing. But I'm still curious, how many times can a digital copy be rented under a forced contract?
Right now, in the current contracts that exist?
Not in the current, because right now they can gauge how many copies will be distributed, just like a paper copy, right? But if this goes through, how many digital copies? Can it be 20,000, 100,000? Will no one ever go to a bookstore again or other store online to buy a digital copy because they can get it from the library? That's my concern.
Exactly. And I think that piece needs to be the source of conversations, right? As the professor had outlined, there's about a half dozen different states doing this. The Connecticut language, for instance, invokes commercially reasonable terms. Right now, we're looking at pricing that would connect to what is an open license, but we could also move to a model that said it was a limited license with a specific price. So we need to set a price that reflects what we're getting. And whether that is a model that is the same for every single book or a model that varies based upon the expected checkouts for a book, these are things that all can and should be options. But we can't keep going with this one-size-fits-all model where one party is dictating the terms, even though it's taxpayer dollars that are involved in buying the product.
All right, thank you. I do agree with you that something has to be done, something has to be changed. I think those conversations should be done, and those answers to that should be done before we vote on it today. So
join me and sit down with me. I literally cannot get a red line. They absolutely refuse to provide any counter terms, and that should speak very loudly to all of us what it means when somebody says there are this many taxpayer dollars, 40 million plus taxpayer dollars involved, and they won't even have a substantive conversation about terms. That's something that all of us should be concerned about.
well, thank you. I think we should sit down at a table. I think they should come and sit down at a table. So we wouldn't be here today if they did that. So thank you.
Thank you, Rep.
Any other questions? Representative Mayfield?
Thank you so much. So you noted that the authors do not make any additional money, whether it's a printed book or a digital book, correct?
That was the case for my librarian witness last time. I would not, of course, speak for every author in the states, but we had one representative author librarian ready to testify for the experiences that she and other authors she was familiar with have had.
Okay, but in general, okay, that's great. Looking at these online services, if a library were to purchase a book from Amazon, say for $30, they put that book on their shelf, and because we have this consortium, that book can potentially be checked out, not just by members of that particular library, but by members of any library that is within that consortium. So one book can actually, be checked out, 100, 200 times easily, and you only pay $30 for it. Is that correct?
That's correct. Those real paper books, hardback, paperback, they can go until they fall apart.
Right, and I don't think people understand that because we belong to these consortiums, that these books do see high usage. We saw that, when the Hunger Games came out, those books flew off the shelf, when Dorothy Must Die, that series, so kids were checking that out left and right. So when we have these digital books, and libraries do get reports, how many people checked out the digital books, how many games were checked out, how many movies were checked out, and those numbers are not in the thousands. They literally are not. I belong to a large library, and I can tell you those numbers are not into the thousands. However, the charges, you would have thought that 8,000 people had checked it out because the charges were not commensurate to the actual price of that book or that item. And that's where the price gouging comes in. I don't think that's what people understand. There is a price gouging that is occurring, and it is unreasonable to libraries. These are small taxing bodies, if they receive, most of them are municipal, but who don't care anything about libraries, but I didn't say that on the record. I appreciate this bill. I understand what it is you're trying to do. I believe the reason that the opponents are not here is because they cannot justify what they are charging for these digital copies. And I believe that is the true scope of what the issue here is today. I understand the leader's questions and where he's going, but without the opposition able to justify why they can upcharge 10 times, for an item that's not even moving, and some of those offerings are not popular offerings. It's very limited popular offerings, and you get a slew, 10,000 books that nobody even wants to look at, but you're paying for all of that, and I think that is part of the problem. I really agree with what it is you're trying to do today. I'm hoping we can move this, not just out of this committee, but, get it on the governor's desk and get it signed ASAP, because our libraries are suffering with the dollar amounts, that they are being charged. This is true price gouging, and this is a true consumer protection bill. I thank you for all that you are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your passion for this bill and for your chief co-sponsorship.
The chair recognizes Representative Weaver.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to follow up, so I'm hoping you can help me understand this. So we are looking at the Connecticut law, that's Public Act, and there's one piece of it that says that it restricts the number of times the library may own. I'm sorry, let me restart. I'm got marbles in my mouth. Okay. It restricts the number of times that the library may loan any electronic literary material over the course of the contract or license agreement. So to me, that reads like that's what's happening today, is that they're limiting the amount of times you can loan that single license, and then you would be stuck renting it again once that number expires on the contract.
So the Connecticut language, I believe, offers a couple of options, one of which is commercially reasonable terms and others relating terms. When the professor testified, and I'll ask him to weigh in on this too, he referred to these as sibling bills. They are not identical on purpose because there are multiple approaches one could take to setting up a fair set of contract terms, and we are trying to put out there a menu of options to try and engage in real conversation here. And if we can't, we're going to do this by legislation. That's exactly what we're doing because years of overtures have not been fruitful, but these bills are purposefully not identical. They are meant to put forth theories that fit for each state and the market we're dealing with. We are the biggest state in this coalition. We are the hardiest readers. We are a well-educated consolidated state. And so we're taking a strong stand in our version of the sibling bills. And I'll ask Professor Courtney if he wants to weigh in further on the particular distinctions between how Illinois versus Connecticut versus the other states that he invoked are handling this.
Yes, certainly. I'll focus on the question here, though, with the that specific region of the basically the the checkout that you're looking at. In Connecticut, they were saying you can't tell a library how many times they can check a book out of that period, right? They were trying to mimic what happens at the circulation desk digitally. That was a choice that was made because of the state's attorney general, or I think they call them solicitors there, wanted to do that because they were looking closely at the power of the purse in the state of Connecticut. So that was a deliberate choice in that particular language.
So I'm thinking of these electronic copies as like you're buying like one license, like you're buying one book. And so just because I have the book doesn't mean I can loan it out 100 times at once. I can just loan out that one license at once.
Well, there's different flavors of that license, right? So some have multiple seats. That means like, 2 or 3 people can see it at the same time,
Yeah.
like a little 5, and some are 1-to-1, which sort of mimics that, and some are, some flavor in between those. That's metered.
So is that what this is getting to? Restricts the number of times the library may loan an electronic library material over the course of the contract?
That would be a prohibited term that you can't put in the contract.
That's a prohibited term that you can't put in the contract.
That's if we're reading from the Connecticut law.
So that's prohibited. That's not what it allows.
Yeah.
So this term would be prohibited from being included. So that they would say that there's no restriction to the number.
Right, mimicking that which happens in print.
Got it.
And all of those, by the way, all of those little provisions in there are basically core library mission that has been removed via contract. This is putting it back.
Got it. Okay. Okay, I think that's all I have for now. Thanks, Professor.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, there being no further debate, Representative Mayfield moves to recommend that House Floor Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 5236 be adopted. Is there leave?
Do we have any words from opposition before we go? Leave, Madam Chair.
With 9 votes in favor, 0 opposed, and 0 with no position, House Floor Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 5236 is recommended for adoption and will be favorably reported to the House floor. There being no more business, the Consumer Protection Committee will recess to the call of the chair. Thank you, Representative Katzman.
Thank you, chairs. Thank you, spokes. Thank you, committee members.